After her ex breaks her arm, an abused waitress makes one call to the Mafia Boss. The bathroom tile was cold against Clara's cheek. She could feel every grout line pressing into her skin, mapping constellations of pain across her face. Somewhere beyond the locked door, Julian was still screaming, words that had long ago stopped meaning anything except danger, danger, danger. Her arm was wrong. She knew it was wrong without looking. The angle, the fire that shot from wrist to shoulder with every breath, the way it lay beside her like something that no longer belonged to her body. Broken, like everything else in this house, like everything else in her life. 3 years, that's how long she'd been disappearing. Piece by piece, Julian had erased her, first her friends, then her family, then her job, then her voice. Now, curled on the bathroom floor of their pristine suburban home, while he slammed his fists against the door, she wondered if there was anything left to save. The door shuddered. The lock, a flimsy thing she'd installed in secret, her one tiny rebellion, groaned under the assault. "Clara!" His voice was thunder and broken glass. "Open this goddamn door, or I swear to God." She didn't hear the rest. Her good hand was already moving, sliding across the tile toward her phone. The phone he didn't know she still had. The one her sister had hidden in a tampon box during her last visit because Julian would never look there. One number. That's all she had. One number was given to her by a woman at the grocery store 3 months ago, pressed into her palm with a whispered, "When you're ready." Clara had memorized it, and then destroyed the paper. Had repeated it to herself every night like a prayer. Had never believed she would actually use it. The door cracked. Splinters flew inward like shrapnel. Clara dialed. The visceral terror of a woman trapped, injured, with nowhere to run and only seconds to act. This is not a story that begins with champagne and ballrooms. It begins in blood and desperation, in the moment when survival becomes the only currency that matters. Introduces Julian as the monster he is, not through elaborate backstory, but through the primal fear he inspires. And somewhere beyond the shattering door, a phone is ringing in the pocket of a man who has been waiting for this call without knowing it. The phone rang twice before someone answered. "This is Lorenzo Rossi." The voice was calm, deep, and utterly controlled. Clara had never met Lorenzo Rossi, had only heard his name mentioned once by the woman at the grocery store, a woman with kind eyes and fading bruises who had said, "If you ever need to disappear, call this number. He helps women like us. Please." Clara's voice came out as a whisper, then a sob. "Please, he's going to." The door exploded inward. Julian stood in the frame like a demon summoned from her nightmares, his handsome face twisted with rage, his knuckles bloody from the wood. Behind him, the hallway light cast him in silhouette, a dark shape, a void in the shape of a man. "Who are you calling?" He was across the bathroom in 2 strides, ripping the phone from her hand. "Who the fuck are you calling?" Clara screamed as his hand closed around her broken arm. The pain was white-hot and absolute, a universe collapsing into a single point of agony. But she heard, even through her own screaming, the voice on the phone. Tinny now, distant but clear. "I have your location. Stay alive. I'm coming." Julian heard it too. Something flickered across his face, the first crack in his armor of rage. Fear. Just a flash, quickly buried. But Clara saw it. He threw the phone against the wall, shattering it into a spray of glass and plastic. Then he grabbed Clara by the hair and dragged her from the bathroom, down the hallway, and into the living room, where he'd broken her arm 20 minutes ago by twisting it behind her back when she'd asked so carefully, so quietly, if she could visit her sister for Christmas. "You stupid bitch." He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair, the way he always did when he was calculating. "Who did you call?" "The cops? You know what happens if you call the cops. You know what I'll do." Clara couldn't speak. The pain was a living thing inside her, stealing her breath, her words, and her thoughts. "It doesn't matter." Julian grabbed his keys from the counter. "We're leaving. Now. I have the cabin upstate. No one will find us there. You're going to learn, Clara. You're gonna finally fucking learn." He hauled her toward the garage, and Clara's legs buckled. She couldn't walk, could barely see. The world was narrowing to a tunnel of darkness. Then, headlights, through the living room window sweeping across the wall like searchlights, followed by the low rumble of an engine. Not a police car. Something else. Something that made Julian freeze with his hand on the garage door. A black Mercedes pulled into their driveway. The kind of car that cost more than their house, that gleamed like a weapon, that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The engine cut, the door opened, and Lorenzo Rossi stepped out. He was not what Clara expected. She'd imagined, in the brief, desperate moments she'd allowed herself to imagine, a bodyguard type, muscles and menace. Instead, Lorenzo Rossi was elegant. Tall, yes, and broad-shouldered, but with the controlled grace of a dancer or a predator. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. His dark hair was silvered at the temples. And his eyes were ancient. They held the weight of things witnessed and avenged, of lines crossed and consequences delivered. When they swept across the scene, Clara crumpled against Julian, her arm at its wrong angle, her face tear-streaked and bruised. Something cold and final settled into them. "Julian Mercer," Lorenzo said. Not a question. Julian's grip on Clara tightened. "Who the fuck are you? Get off my property." "I'm the person your wife called when you broke her arm." Lorenzo's voice was soft, almost gentle. It was the most terrifying thing Clara had ever heard. "And I'm the person who's going to take her somewhere safe. You have two choices in how this goes. She's not going anywhere." Julian shoved Clara behind him, reaching for something on the hall table. A letter opener, Clara realized with sick horror. "This is my house. She's my wife. And you're trespassing." Lorenzo didn't move. Didn't blink. "Choice 1. You step aside. Let me take her, and we handle your situation through civilized channels. Choice 2. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "There is no choice 2 that ends well for you." For a long moment, the three of them stood frozen. Clara could feel Julian's rage radiating off him, like heat from a furnace. She could see the calculations behind his eyes, the cost-benefit analysis he ran on everything. The same analysis that had once concluded she was worth keeping, worth breaking, worth controlling. Then Julian laughed. A short, ugly sound. "You think I'm scared of some rich asshole in a suit? You don't know who I am. You don't know who I know. You're going to regret." Lorenzo moved. Later, Clara would struggle to remember exactly what happened. One moment, Julian was standing, letter opener raised. The next he was on his knees, the weapon clattering across the floor, his arm twisted behind him in a hold that looked almost casual but had him gasping in pain. "I know exactly who you are, Julian." Lorenzo's voice was still soft, still calm. "I know about the embezzlement from your firm. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the 17 incidents of domestic assault that were never reported because your wife was too terrified to speak and your neighbors too polite to intervene." He leaned closer. "I know everything. And if you ever come near Clara again, the world will know too. Every client, every colleague, every country club member who shakes your hand. They'll all know exactly what kind of man you are." He released Julian, who collapsed forward onto his hands and knees. "Clara." Lorenzo's voice changed completely when he said her name. Gentle now. Careful. He was already shrugging off his suit jacket as he approached her. "Can you walk?" She shook her head. "That's all right. May I carry you?" She nodded. He wrapped the jacket around her shoulders. It was warm and smelled of expensive cologne, and she realized she was shaking uncontrollably, and then he lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "This isn't over," Julian snarled from the floor. "She's mine. You can't just—" "She was never yours." Lorenzo didn't look back. "She was always her own. You just made her forget that for a while." He carried her out into the night, past the gleaming Mercedes where a driver was already holding the door open, into a back seat that felt like a sanctuary. As the car pulled away, Clara looked back through the rear window. Julian was standing on the porch now, his silhouette black against the light, getting smaller, smaller, smaller. For the first time in 3 years, she could breathe. The drive was a blur of city lights and soft leather seats and someone, a woman in medical scrubs, gently examining Clara's arm while asking quiet questions. "Where does it hurt? Can you move your fingers? Scale of 1 to 10? Clara answered as best she could, but she felt disconnected from her own body, floating somewhere above it. Shock, she thought distantly. This is what shock feels like. Lorenzo sat across from her, speaking in low tones into his phone. Fragments reached her. "Prepare the guest suite. Dr. Marchetti on standby. Yes, a full security detail." When he ended the call, he caught her watching him. "We're going to the estate," he said. "My home. You'll be safe there. No one enters without my authorization. No one. You'll have your own rooms, your own space. Whatever you need." "Why?" The words scraped out of her throat. "Why are you doing this?" Something shifted behind his eyes. A door, opening briefly onto old pain. "Because someone should have done it for my mother," he said quietly. And no one did. Before Clara could respond, the car slowed. Through the window, she saw gates, massive wrought iron gates set into walls of ancient stone, opening automatically as the Mercedes approached. Beyond them, a driveway wound through manicured gardens toward a house that looked less like a home and more like a fortress dressed in beauty. The Rossi estate. When the car stopped, Lorenzo was out first, rounding to her door. The woman in scrubs, a nurse, Clara realized now, had immobilized her arm in a temporary splint, but the pain was still a constant throb beneath the surface. "Can you walk now?" Lorenzo asked. Clara tested her legs. They felt steadier. "I think so." But when she stood, the world tilted. Lorenzo caught her easily, one arm around her waist, steadying her without confining her. A careful distinction that some deep part of Clara recognized and appreciated. "Lean on me," he said, "just until we get inside." She did. And for the first time in 3 years, leaning on someone didn't feel like surrender. If Clara's journey from the bathroom floor to the Rossi estate moved you, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell for more stories of justice. 3 days passed in the cocoon of the Rossi estate. Clara slept, really slept, for the first time in years. The bed was enormous, the sheets impossibly soft, and the lock on the door was hers to control. Lorenzo had shown her that first night how it worked: a deadbolt, a chain, and a reinforced frame. No one enters without your permission. Ever. She'd slept for 14 hours straight. On the 3rd day, she was sitting in the sun-drenched breakfast room, picking at a plate of fruit with her good hand while her broken arm rested in a proper cast, when the screaming started. At first, she thought she was imagining it, the familiar cadence of Julian's rage reaching through walls and distance and time. But then the security detail was moving, speaking into radios, and Lorenzo appeared in the doorway with an expression carved from stone. "He's at the gate," Lorenzo said flatly. "He's demanding to see you." Clara's coffee cup slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the marble floor, but she couldn't move to clean it, couldn't move at all. The world was narrowing again, the way it always did, when Julian's voice reached her. Tunnel vision. Racing heart. The certainty, bone deep, that she would never be free. "Clara." Lorenzo's voice, cutting through the panic. "Look at me." She couldn't. "Clara, look at me." She raised her eyes. He was crouching in front of her now, keeping his distance, his hands open and visible. "He cannot reach you here. The gates are reinforced steel. The walls are 12 feet high. There are 20 armed personnel between him and this room. Do you understand?" She tried to nod, but the panic was a wave crashing over her, dragging her under. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't breathe. I can't." "You're having a panic attack. It's your body remembering danger that isn't here anymore. It will pass. I'm gonna stay right here. I'm not going to touch you unless you ask. And when you're ready, I'm gonna show you something." The next several minutes were a blur of breathing exercises she didn't remember learning, and Lorenzo's calm, steady voice counting with her. "In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Good." Again. Slowly, so slowly, the world expanded again. Her heartbeat calmed. Her vision cleared. Julian was still screaming. She could hear him now through the window, his voice hoarse with rage. "She's my wife. You can't keep her from me. I'll destroy you. Come with me," Lorenzo said. "If you're ready. I want you to see something." He led her to a security room filled with monitors, showing every angle of the estate. On one screen, Julian was visible at the gate, red-faced, fists pounding against the iron, his expensive car parked haphazardly on the road. On another screen, police cars were pulling up behind him. "I called them 20 minutes ago," Lorenzo said, "for trespassing and violation of the emergency protective order I filed on your behalf. Watch." Clara watched as officers approached Julian, as he tried to bluster, tried to charm, and tried to intimidate, and none of it worked. As handcuffs clicked around his wrists, as he was placed in the back of a patrol car, still shouting, still raging, still so certain of his own power. But the car was pulling away now. Julian's face was disappearing behind tinted glass. And Clara was still here, still standing, still alive. "This is not the end of it," Lorenzo said quietly. "He'll post bail. He'll hire lawyers. The legal battle will be long and ugly. But today, right now, he is the one in the cage. Not you." Clara's eyes filled with tears. Not of fear this time. Of relief. Drop a comment. What was the exact moment you knew Julian's reign of terror was over? Share your thoughts on Clara's courage. It was nearly midnight when Clara found Lorenzo in his study. She'd been unable to sleep, not from fear now, but from questions that wouldn't quiet. The estate was vast, but she'd learned its rhythms over the past week. She knew he worked late. She knew his light would be on. He looked up when she knocked on the open door, and something in his face softened. "Can't sleep. Can't stop thinking." She hovered in the doorway. "Can I come in?" "Always." She settled into a leather chair across from his desk, curling her legs beneath her. The cast on her arm was covered in signatures now. The estate staff had presented her with markers and insisted. It made her smile every time she looked at it. "You said something that first night," she began. "About your mother. That someone should have helped her." Lorenzo set down his pen. The lamplight carved shadows under his cheekbones, making him look older, more worn. "My mother was 19 when she married my father," he said slowly. "He was charming, successful, and from a good family. Everyone said she was so lucky." The word lucky came out bitter as ash. Within a year, she wasn't allowed to leave the house without his permission. Within 2, she wasn't allowed to speak to her own sisters. By the time I was born, she had become a ghost in her own life. Clara's throat tightened. What happened to her? She died when I was 11. An accident, they called it. A fall down the stairs. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. My father remarried within a year. A younger woman, prettier, just as trapped. And him? Your father? Dead. Natural causes, officially. Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and there was something dark and satisfied in their depths. He was a very unhealthy man, my father. Stress, I imagine. The stress of being what he was. Clara didn't ask for details. She suspected she didn't want them. I was 15 when I made a promise to myself, Lorenzo continued, that I would never be him, and that I would spend my life doing what I wished someone, anyone, had done for my mother. He gestured vaguely at the estate around them. This is the result. A network. A system. Women who need to disappear can disappear. Women who need safety can find it. Women who need resources, legal, financial, emotional, can access them. How many? Over the years? Hundreds. I don't keep count. The number isn't the point. He leaned forward slightly. You're the point, Clara. Each woman who walks out of a hell like that, she's the point. Clara was crying again, she realized. Tears were sliding silently down her cheeks. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. Live. Heal. Become whoever you were, before he tried to erase you. Lorenzo's voice was fierce now, passionate. And if you want to thank me, someday, when you're strong enough, help another woman do the same. 2 weeks later, Lorenzo invited Clara to witness what he called the dismantling. They sat in his study, watching a live feed from a downtown warehouse that had been converted into a meeting space. On screen, Julian Mercer was seated at a metal table across from 2 men in expensive suits, men Clara recognized from society pages, from Julian's constant networking, and from the life she'd been forced to perform for 3 years. His partners, Lorenzo explained, from the investment firm, and the gentleman to the left is a federal prosecutor. They've been very interested in Julian's creative accounting for some time. Clara watched as documents were spread across the table. As Julian's face went pale, then red, then a mottled purple she recognized. As his bluster crumbled into bargaining, and his bargaining crumbled into threats, and his threats crumbled into the desperate pleading of a man who had finally met a wall he couldn't shatter. Embezzlement, Lorenzo said calmly. Wire fraud. Money laundering. The evidence has been building for years, but no one thought to look closely at Julian Mercer. Upstanding citizen, loving husband, pillar of the community. His smile was razor thin. I looked closely. How did you? I told you. I know everything about men like Julian. I make it my business to know, and I wait, very patiently, until the right moment to use what I know. On screen, Julian was standing now, handcuffs being applied for the second time in 2 weeks. But this time, there would be no bail. This time, the charges were federal. This time, he was facing years, decades possibly, in a cell. He'll never touch you again, Lorenzo said quietly. He'll never touch anyone again. Clara watched her former husband, her tormentor, her nightmare, the man who had broken her arm and her spirit, being led away by federal agents. She waited for satisfaction, for triumph, for relief. What she felt instead was a vast, aching emptiness. 3 years of her life, gone. 3 years of fear and pain and silence. And now she had to figure out who she was without him. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. What happens now? She asked. Whatever you want, Lorenzo replied. For the first time in a long time, Clara, your life is entirely your own. Dr. Amara Okonkwo had kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Clara found simultaneously intimidating and comforting. Her office was decorated in soft blues and greens, with plants on every surface and a window overlooking the estate gardens. I feel like a fraud, Clara said during their 4th session. I'm living in this mansion with servants and security guards, and I feel guilty that I'm not miserable anymore. Like I don't deserve to be safe. That's common, Dr. Okonkwo said. Survivors often struggle with the sensation of safety because it's unfamiliar. The nervous system has learned that safety is dangerous, that good things are preludes to pain. How do I unlearn that? Slowly, gently. We teach your body, day by day, that the cage is open, that you can move freely without being struck down. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward. Tell me about a moment this week when you felt peace, even briefly. Clara thought. Yesterday, I was walking in the garden, alone, no security escort, and I realized I could keep walking. Off the property, down the road, anywhere I wanted. No one would stop me. No one would punish me. And how did that feel? Terrifying, Clara laughed, shakily. And wonderful, like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing you have wings. That's growth, Dr. Okonkwo said with a small smile. That's exactly what healing looks like. It's not the absence of fear, it's the presence of freedom alongside it. They talked for another hour, about Julian, about her childhood, about the patterns that had made her vulnerable to a man like him in the first place. Clara cried. She raged. She sat in silence, and through all of it, Dr. Okonkwo remained steady, remained present, and remained safe. When Clara left the session, she found Lorenzo waiting in the hallway, not crowding her, not demanding her attention, just present. "How was it?" he asked. "Hard." Clara exhaled slowly. "But I think I'm starting to understand something." "What?" "That I'm not broken." She met his eyes. "I was damaged. I was hurt, but I was never broken. Julian couldn't break me because the part of me that survived, that called you, that walked out of that house, that part was always whole." Lorenzo's expression shifted into something that looked almost like pride. "I never doubted that for a moment," he said. Spring came to the Rossi estate in a riot of color, cherry blossoms and tulips, and the green smell of new life pressing through the soil. Clara had been there for 3 months now, and for the first time, she could imagine a future. She found Lorenzo in the garden, standing among the roses, his suit jacket discarded over a stone bench. He looked almost normal in the afternoon light. Not the untouchable mogul, not the protective stranger, just a man with tired eyes and a gentle smile. "I need to talk to you," she said. He turned. "Of course." They walked together through the winding paths, past fountains and sculptures, and the ancient oak where Clara had started reading again. Real books, not the self-help tomes Julian had approved, but novels and poetry and anything she wanted. "I'm going to leave," she said. Lorenzo stopped walking. Something flickered in his expression, pain, quickly controlled. "I've found an apartment," Clara continued. "A few miles from here. It's small, but it's mine. I'm going to get a job. There's a nonprofit that works with domestic violence survivors, and they're looking for someone to help with their outreach program. And I'm going to—" She took a breath. "I'm going to keep seeing Dr. Okonkwo. Keep healing. Keep becoming whoever I'm supposed to be." "That sounds," Lorenzo said carefully, "like exactly what you should do. There's something else." Clara turned to face him fully. "Something I need to say." She could see it in his eyes, the hope he was trying not to feel. Over the past months, something had grown between them. Not romance, not yet. She wasn't ready for that, and might never be ready for that. But connection, understanding, the recognition of two wounded souls who had found unexpected shelter in each other. "I know you care about me," she said, "and I care about you. But I need to know that I can stand on my own before I can stand with anyone else." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." Lorenzo's voice was rough. "I would never ask you to be anything other than whole. So this isn't goodbye. It's, see you later." He smiled then, a real smile, unguarded and warm. "I'll be here, whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready. And if you're not," he shrugged, "I'll still be here. Just as a friend. Just as someone who believes in you." Clara closed the distance between them, rose on her tiptoes, and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Then she walked away, through the garden, toward the car that was waiting to take her to her new apartment, her new job, and her new life. Behind her, Lorenzo watched her go with something like hope blooming in his ancient wounded eyes. 1 year later, the support group met every Thursday in the community center on Maple Street. Clara had started as a volunteer, making coffee and setting up chairs. Now she was the facilitator, standing before a circle of women with haunted eyes, sharing her stories so they could begin to share theirs. "The hardest part," she told them, "wasn't leaving. I believed I deserved to leave. It was unlearning the voice in my head that said his cruelty was my fault, his rage was my responsibility, and his control was my safety." She looked around the circle, at Maria, who had fled with her 3 children 2 weeks ago, at Destiny, who was still struggling to press charges against her boyfriend. At 72 years old, Ruth was only just realizing that 50 years of discipline had been 50 years of abuse. "You are not responsible for the violence done to you," Clara said firmly. "You are not weak for staying. You are not stupid for loving someone who hurt you. You are human, and you are brave, so incredibly brave, for being here tonight." After the session, Clara gathered her things and stepped outside into the spring evening. The air smelled like rain and possibility. Her car was parked in the lot, a modest sedan she'd bought herself with money from her job, with savings she'd built, with resources that were entirely her own. She ran her hand along the hood, still marveling at the simple freedom of it. She drove across town to the restaurant where Lorenzo was waiting. He stood when she entered, and Clara noticed, as she always noticed now, that he didn't approach her, didn't crowd her, and didn't assume permission. He waited until she closed the distance herself, until she initiated the embrace. "You look happy," he said. "I am happy." She smiled, and it reached her eyes, something that had once felt impossible. I ran the group tonight. 3 new members. One of them, she reminded me of myself. Terrified. Ashamed. Convinced she was alone. And you showed her she wasn't. I showed her there's life after. Clara took his hand as they walked to their table. Messy, complicated, difficult life. But life. Real life. They ordered dinner. They talked about her work. About his latest project, a new safe house in Brooklyn. About the spring garden and the coming summer. And about the future unfolding before them like an endless road. At the end of the evening, Lorenzo walked her to her car. Same time next week? He asked. Same time next week. She kissed him then, properly, fully, for the first time. A year of healing had brought her to this moment, and she claimed it without apology. When they parted, Lorenzo's eyes were suspiciously bright. I'm proud of you, he said. I hope you know that. I know. Clara opened her car door and slid behind the wheel. I'm proud of me too. She drove home through the glittering city, her hands steady on the wheel, her heart finally, at peace. She had been shattered. She had been saved. But ultimately, she had saved herself. And that made all the difference. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they aren't alone. Leaving is the bravest thing you can do, and help is always one call away.